onto the side. The exact same way I do in my flow posing. There's so many reasons why I have my go-to poses, because number one, our clients are paying us to document their babies. You know, they're not paying, unless they request it, they're not paying me to create these wonderful elaborate setups and, you know, that take a ridiculous amount of time to do. They want to remember their baby at that time in their life, you know, the beginning of their life, and it's such an incredible time to share with our clients. So for me, the simplest of poses are often the best, because I can get beautiful close-up photos of their face and you know, little curly positions, like when they're on their back all tucked up or laying on their side, and they look natural and they're comfortable. So these are my go-to poses, which means I can get quite a few different images, a little bit of a variety out of them before I start moving on to props and things like that. But all of my go-to poses, which are the baby on their back, the baby on their side, and then the baby on their tummy, I do them on my posing bag, but I can also do them in props using the exact same way that I pose them on my bag. There's a few other little things that I like to do, like to go over as well when I'm teaching these type of things, is that we can never be too safe, and we can never, you know, go over those safety measures and make sure that everything's in place, you know, as much as we can. So I have a couple of people that I like to call on for advice. There's a friend of mine in Australia who is a photographer, but also used to work in neonatal care. So she is, you know, an incredible source of information. So if you're looking for more information about babies and what they're capable of, I strongly recommend, you know, sourcing someone that does actually have the qualifications to give you advice. Because, you know, the more we know about these little babies, the easier they are to handle, and, you know, the smoother your sessions are going to be. So when it comes to getting advice on babies, then, you know, there are different fields. There are GPs and things like that. There are people that work in neonatal nurseries. We have recently been in contact with a lady in Australia who is she's a professor and a lecturer in neonatal intensive care and physiotherapy. So she, you know, she has so much information, and the more we know about that, the more confidence our parents are going to have in us as well in handling their babies. You know, these little things, this is somebody's world. We can't, you know, take that for granted for the sake of an image. So there, you know, everything, you know, falls back onto all that information. So I've got like a few tips that I've talked about before in my previous classes, but, you know, to go over them again really briefly, you always have to have a spotter nearby. It doesn't matter if they're on a posing bag and they're in the middle, close, you know, in the center, and you can see that they're actually not going to go anywhere. You can't leave them unattended, you know, and being able to do that in your session for your clients, and sort of say, oh, do you mind just coming and sitting near my bag while I grab a couple of things? Showing them that you are, you know, holding that child's safety in the highest regard is just going to impress them to no end. It's going to make them feel secure. It's going to make them feel confident. And then also, you know, what we talked about before about keeping the room at that constant temperature. The 28-degree mark for me, Celsius, which is 80 Fahrenheit, not very good with my Fahrenheit, but that is a great constant temperature. If you feel it start to heat up, if you're using just space heaters with no thermostat and it hits at 28 degrees, but it continues to rise, you're going to overheat your baby, you're going to overheat yourself, but you're also going to make your parents and anybody else that's with them during their session really uncomfortable. And as I've said before, babies can't regulate their body temperature. So keeping them warm is important, but not overheating them either. And if you do use a space heater, make sure that you've got it at a safe distance. For me, sometimes in winter, like if I'm sitting in front of my bag, I'll hold my hand just to the outside of the bag to see if I can feel that heat hitting it. And if I hold it there for 5 to 10 seconds and my hand's starting to burn, it's way too close. You've got to move that back. Occasionally, when I'm using props in winter, I might pick up a little space heater and just hold it above the prop to warm that area, but then move it away. If it's too hot on that baby, you will burn them and it will unsettle them, and you'll end up with not being able to do too much with that baby. And washing your hands and using a hand sanitizer. Like here, between every changeover with babies, every time we go to break, we wash our hands. We're washing them constantly, especially when we're eating, we're going outside of the room, and we're using hand sanitizer as well. Like, little babies are subject to so many things, and we just have to make sure that we take every precaution, right down to that. And when it comes to posing, any baby, even like our little girl with the little 6-year-old, I think she was, Marley, like, she was getting uncomfortable. I didn't want to force her into any particular pose at all. So yeah, you can't do that with babies. You're going to hurt them and it's going to unsettle them. So you have to gradually transition them into every pose. And like us, we have our comfy space. When you lay down on the lounge or you lay down on your bed, you have your comfy space. Babies have their comfy space as well. You try and force or overextend any of their little ligaments, their arms, their legs, their neck, you're going to injure them, and you're going to make them very uncomfortable if you don't injure them as well, which will unsettle them. So yeah, a few more tips. It just, like I was saying before, always support their head. Having your hand there, or having a parent that's nice and close by, just placing their hand there. And if you do have a parent that's got a hand that's shaking or a hand that's tense, show them and put your hand on their hand and say, this is the type of pressure that I would like you to have. It's not hard, and it's firm, but it's soft. So your hand becomes an extension of them, because if you're trying to hold a baby's head up like that, it's going to feel that and it's going to respond to it, which is not what we want. And taking extra care when you're using props. I mean, I've spoken about that for the past few years over and over again. There are certain props that you shouldn't use, and then there are some props that you can use. But using common sense when it comes to props. If it's going to break, if it's a breakable object like ceramic, like glass or anything like that, I'm sorry to say it, but it's stupidity. Like, it's common sense that you would never put a baby into a breakable object. And I have noticed in the past that it was fairly common practice, but in the last few years, you actually see less and less of those images online, which is really great. So that means that the word is spreading. But when it comes to other props, even nests and baskets and things like that, if there are twigs or anything sort of sticking out and a baby's arms and legs go flying out, they're going to hit that, and it could cause a scratch. It will cause them to stir or become unsettled, anything like that. You don't want that to happen. So making sure that you've got precautions in place for that as well. I like to use my cloth nappies to line the inside of every prop, and when they're nice and settled and they're in that pose, that's when I take those cloth nappies away to get that shot. Talked about glass. And composite images where necessary. So even when you don't need to, doesn't necessarily have to be a composite image, but if you feel that a baby isn't going to sit in that pose, then take a photo with a parent's hands up here and then another photo with the hand down there, and put them together to Photoshop, because the safety of that baby, or just even the contentment of that baby, is going to make your job so much easier. And doesn't make you any less of a photographer for having to clone out a hand or, composite a couple of support hands just to sort of keep them there. Like, even if you've got a baby on its side and its legs are constantly moving, and if you put the legs in place and then the hands are moving, photograph it with the hand up there and then move the hand up there and put them together if you've got a baby that is stirring. And reading your baby. So the first time I hold a baby when it comes into the studio, it gives me a really good opportunity to sense the way it's moving or squirming or anything like that. If it's completely sleepy and dead to the world, then you've got a great chance of getting some beautiful shots without it waking up. But if you've got a baby that's awake when it arrives and they're stretching, you'll start to see that babies like to sort of be positioned a certain way. Some like to arch their back, some like to round their back. So reading that on them, and if they are squirming in any way and they're showing signs of discomfort, there is something wrong. So reading those cues is going to help you sort of flow through your sessions a lot easier. And another thing that I get asked a lot about, what about premature babies? And we do get a lot of those into the studios. So when I take my bookings, months in advance, we'll have, a couple of phone calls or a couple of emails from people saying, our baby has arrived early, we're going to be staying in hospital for a certain amount of time, things like that. Knowing a little bit more about premature babies is fairly important in your job, because they're subject to more than a full-term baby. I had twins, obviously. If you've watched my previous class, I had them at 31 weeks. So they spent 6 weeks in hospital, and we got to know a lot about premature babies and what they were capable of and what they were sort of, susceptible to at birth. So knowing things like, they can have breathing problems and bleeding on the brain, heart conditions, all of those things. Everything that I've listed there is checked at the hospital before they leave. So they're not going to come to your studio and not know that those are there. But just keeping in mind that it doesn't matter how long that baby's been in hospital, it could have been treated or could have been, cared for a number of reasons. So talking to your clients and getting as much information from them as possible so you know how to handle that baby and what to do. And yeah, just keeping it as comfortable as possible. And something that's really, really important to me, I have a lawyer friend, and she has, told me about a couple of court cases that are happening around the world, and it's actually incredible how many babies are injured, from the falls related and things like that. And during our session, we're moving babies constantly, from our posing bag to props to parents to children. If a baby was to fall, then that's going to end your business, and it's also going to be potentially critical to that baby. So taking every safety measure is so important, because you could lose everything. You could lose everything. So making sure that you are aware of those statistics and that the potential harm and dangers that could happen during a session. Which is always, again, why I have my go-to poses, because they're on my posing bag, I'm sitting around it, they're safe, they're simple, and I'm not moving the baby too much. So yeah, pretty basic. Common sense is it's all it is, really, when you're working with them, using your head about how you're transitioning them, where you're moving them to, and again, not forcing them into any pose. And when you're moving them around, and attempting poses where they're potentially hanging from something, always having something at least, no less than an inch or two from the beanbag or from support underneath. I think we've already really covered that. That's what we talked about before with those composites, and just making it safe and easy. It's really, really simple. I don't need to go over that again. And now we have a baby to photograph. So we have this little girl called Maddie coming out, and she is 11 days old. Come and have a seat. And she's sound asleep, and she is beautiful. Oh my goodness. Hi, beautiful girl. Oh. Shh, 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 shh. So I've got my cream blanket on, and cream's a colour that I like to use, but that's me. So I do a lot of creams, and girls, I just think they look really pretty and clean. And what I'm going to do is just grab my little box of girls' hats, and I've got some wraps as well. So when I'm posing them on their back, which is the one that I'm going to start with, I like to have my well in the middle of my bag. She's having a big stretch there. She's arching her back, which is what I was talking about before when you're reading their cues. We'll just keep her nice and snug there. I use this cream. And we're going to go in the middle Okay. Can I get you to come and just bring the heater a little bit closer over here for me? Thank you. Actually, if you leave it there and just turn it so that the air is going to blow in this direction, perfect. Yeah, maybe your back a little bit. Perfect. Thank you so much. So if I was in my studio and things like that were sort of a bit of an issue, then I would have been silly not to have fixed it before I started. But I'm working in a new environment for me as well. So even if you are working in somebody's home in a new environment, making sure you've got all of those things set up before you start is really important. So that way you're not having to get up and down to go and fix them. And it is not time to wake up. Did she have a little feed before she came down?
No, she wouldn't eat.
She didn't want to wake up. What's a bet she does now? So when I pop them down for this pose, I always like to have them slightly on their side. I am going to slip her nappy off, but I just wanted to pull that blanket around her before I do, so she's nice and secure. Thank you. Did I not say she was going to wake up? She has been sound asleep up there. Oh, hang on a minute, the eyes are closing. Now she's gone back to sleep. She is like a little doll. So I wouldn't, like, she had that big stretch, she looked right up at me. I wouldn't start to undress her now or move because I'm going to continue to wake her up. So keeping my hands, they're soft but they're firm, keeping them there just while she drifts back off into that sleep is where I want her to be. See? Let's see what she does. Because of the way I'm going to wrap her, I want to take the nappy off so you can't see it. Oh, you are pretty. I would always have this kind of undone before I would start, but here at Creative Live we're trying really hard not to, you know, show bits and pieces that we don't need to see. Would you be able to grab my mobile phone for me? What I'm going to do is just pop a little bit of white noise on that might help her drift off to sleep. I think it's on the desk over there. I'm just going to bring her legs up and pull this nice and tight around her. Oh, we have a hungry baby. Actually, she had a little bit of a mess in her nappy, so thank you. Could you grab me a like a tissue, not a wet wipe? And we're going to use a tissue because I don't want a wet wipe to wake her up even more, because she may drift off back to sleep here. We'll just see how she goes. So I'm not going to put this on loud so you can still hear me. But just enough, yeah, just drop it down there for me, thank you. There was an article written not so long ago about white noise and how loud it should be near a baby. And someone was sort of talking about you know, the potential harm that it could do to their hearing. But she's having a really good squirm here. She's waking up. Hi, everybody. Shh, let's see what she does. If she continues to wake up, I'll give her back to her mum because we have another little baby that we can photograph. And when I went to visit her in the room, she was sound asleep and we tried to undress her and get her to wake up for a feed, but she just wouldn't. So it's always so funny though. I always have parents come in and they say, yeah, good luck with that baby, it never sleeps, and it'll sleep. Or you'll have a baby that comes in and be sound asleep and they're like, they sleep all the time, and then they're awake for the next 3 hours. So you can never judge or estimate what's going to happen. They have their own agenda and they're going to do what they want to do. But she's not showing any signs of wanting to go back off to sleep, so we might see if we can get our next baby. He is asleep. We did. I'm going to get you to give her a little feed outside in the nice warm mother's room. Now she does not have a nappy on, so you can leave this around her so she stays nice and warm. What are you doing with that leg? Wrap her up so she's nice and secure. Now, do you want to open that blanket up? Because it's a bit cold when you go out of this room. There we go, little one. Okie dokie. So our next little baby is a boy, and I was going to use a nice grey, but seeing as we haven't used the white, we'll use that, and then we'll change it up when little Maddie comes back.
Kelly, what do you do with premature babies? What poses won't you do with them?
With premature babies,
yeah.
I think it's all got to do with the baby at the time. I've noticed over the last few years that working with them, they tend to be, you know, a little bit stiffer, not used to being wrapped up in a tight ball, but they are used to being wrapped. So I would probably stick to more wrapping techniques, because when they are in hospital for periods of time, I notice with my two that they have such a routine and a schedule with how everything is run in there, because, you know, they can be up to, depending on the hospital, they can be up to like, you know, 50 babies in a nursery. So they have to, you know, keep on time with feeds and all of that kind of stuff. So they are wrapped and fed and put down. So understanding that in a session is really important, because if you're overhandling a baby, like a premature baby that's, you know, not used to being up and down and up and down. I mean, they are used to being handled because they have been out longer. Not like a brand spanking new baby, but they're used to being wrapped and secure. And hospital wrapping techniques are incredible. Rightio, so we have little William.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, is he sound asleep?
He is.
Oh, look at him.
Ooh.
Oh, hi. Oh, so going back, just while I slip his nappy off, going back to talking about that white noise, there was a really interesting article, and there was no evidence that, you know, it could potentially hurt their eardrums in it. But, you know, I think, again, using common sense, if it's really, really loud, you wouldn't put it right next to the baby. It's just a constant sound, because when they're inside the womb, they're surrounded by noise the whole time. And when it's really, really quiet, and you start talking, or a toddler's running around and dropping stuff, a lot of the times they won't flinch or move, but sometimes they do. Look at this little boy. How much did he weigh?
9 pounds 4 ounces.
He's a good size. He's got chub. I love it. Radio. And he's been circumcised, has he? Yeah, and it's all healed nicely?
Yep.
Sweet. circumcision is also another thing I get asked about a lot. In Australia, it's not something that they do often now, but obviously in some places they do it regularly still. But the babies that I have had to deal with, you know, they've had a lot of Vaseline and things like that to protect the womb. And because we're working with a lot of fabrics and textures that have got fibres and loose fibres, I tend to keep the nappy on and work around it. Only because, I mean, if they're covered in Vaseline, you could only imagine how much fluff would stick to that. And it would be a nightmare for the parents to try and keep that clean. So yeah, I tend to leave a nappy on, and we've got little things like pants, but his is healed. And I want to take his nappy off because it's wet, so it will be bulging through the pants. But yeah, I keep at home in my change table like a few newborn nappies, not preemie ones, sorry, just the, you know, the newborn tiny size. And I also have like tissues and wet wipes and nappy sacks and all that kind of handy, so you can clean them up. But I'm going to pop a pair of pants on him because it's all healed. There's no Vaseline down there at the moment, is there?
There was a little bit, but since you went to the bathroom, it's probably...
No, there's none there.
It's probably gone.
It's gone. So I'm going to just start with the back pose again, because it's where we kind of left off. But I'm going to show you something a little bit different, like a variation of it, without wrapping them, but creating that nice well in the middle and using some nappies around them to make it really natural and soft. So these little pants my mum knitted before I came away. She's been knitting some great little outfits, but she's been using patterns by Monkey Moo Moo, and they're the cutest little designs. And it's got a little bow there. Okay. So I'm just going to push my bag down in the middle there, create that nice well. And what I'm going to do is pop him onto his back, but I'm going to bring his head up here and his bottom down here. So he's going to have his face in the direction of that light once we pose him. Oh, this blanket is so snuggly. So I'm using my forearm and my hands to keep his little legs in place, and I was keeping him really close to the beanbag. I'm moving quite slowly because I'm transitioning him onto the bag, so I don't want him, if I move with sudden movements, you know, he could startle and wake up, and I want him to stay nice and sleepy. Oh, that's so cute. So letting him have a little stretch and keeping my hands there while he's doing that. Thank you. Rightio, to keep his legs up, and we're going to pull the pants up to cover his belly button, I'm going to use some of my cloth nappies to put under and support and hold him in place. So we're going to go all the way to the bottom again. And then we're going to give him some support at the back. And I'm not pushing it under him, but you can see that I'm just moving that cloth nappy in around the back of that arm there. Because I kind of want him to come towards the camera, not away from the camera. And at the moment he's lying really, really flat, and we want him to be in a really nice curly position. So giving him this time to kind of relax and drift off into that deep sleep, as we do this is great, because then we can start to really, refine where the hands are placed and all that kind of stuff. So at the moment where I've got him positioned with that light, you can see that little line under his eye. When you are lighting from that direction and you're flat, by lifting his head up, we're bringing him into that light. When he's flat and that light is hitting him that way, and you've got these little wrinkles, the shadow is going to make those more predominant. So you lift their head forward to bring them into that light. I love how he's got his little hand up there all on his own. It's so cute. Okay. So I'm going to sit down here on the floor, just so I can get a good look at where he is. Oh. So I'm going to cross these little legs over again. I'm going to bring in one more cloth nappy here to give him a little bit more support. I flew with this bag all the way over here. It's almost like they've let some beans out of the airport. So I'm all the way at the bottom underneath my layers of blankets, and I'm just folding that cloth nappy in underneath where I need it to hold him in that pose. We don't want any creases in our blankets. We can see that little bow. His hands are really cute and sweet. Now I'm just going to turn my beanbag. You can see my blankets going a bit crazy there at the back, but I'm turning him towards the light. I would rather fix my light here now in camera than trying to fix it in post, because you're going to see what you're doing to that image. So turning, and I'm watching the shadows and the fall off on his little face. I didn't do that very well. All right, there we go. Can I get another couple of clamps? Actually, don't worry. Yeah, I might actually grab some clamps. So I do love Photoshop and fading blankets and things like that, but it's so much easier when you get all of those wrinkles out in Photoshop. He's got a good startle reflex. Okay, now we're starting to get that nice smooth background. So with a setup like this, as simple as it is, making sure that you're getting all the little details, everything perfect, that's what makes them look so incredible. Are you right there? So if you had a baby that was unsettled, he's not. He's beautiful and sleepy. He's just got a bit of a reaction going on there to me at the moment. You know, you would get your safe shot right about now. And then you would come in and start to refine all of these little things like hands and feet and things like that. So we're just going to give his head just a little bit more lift, and I'm just folding the cloth nappy in underneath, tilting him up to make him nice and curly. And we can start to take our first shot. So when I'm shooting with this particular lens, I wouldn't come in at say 35 mils and shoot this because I'm going to create some terrible distortion. I'm always going to zoom in to around 70 mil for that beautiful focal length. And I'm going to find my camera angle. Get my strap untwisted first. I'm not going to shoot up his nose or anything like that. And bring my aperture back to 2.8, which is where I like to be. And because we're shooting on white, I'm actually going to come up to around 2/3 of a stop to a full stop overexposed. I'm also looking, while I'm getting my angle, I'm looking to see if I'm shooting up his nose or something like that. It does up? Oh, great, look at that. So that means I can actually come up a little bit higher now and start to look at my different angles. Because a lot of the times, you know, when I'm shooting, I'm concentrating on so many other things that you forget. Little things like shooting up the nose and all of that kind of stuff. So being able to see it in that type of size is great. So I'm just going to adjust his feet. I'm going to cross this little foot here underneath and bring this leg here down a bit so we can see those toes. I'm just pushing those nappies at the back there so he doesn't roll backwards. Would you be able to come and turn the heater down so I can feel it starting to warm up now? Oh, thank you. So doing little things with their hands and feet and seeing where they like to fall naturally. He's got his mouth open with his tongue hanging out. So a shot like this, I've still got a fair bit of room in my exposure. He's got his two little feet there together, which means I'm now like able to come in here and get a close-up of those shots of his feet. Zoomed right in, I'm going to come in as close as I can get and grab that. So now I can move him onto his side into that next pose. You could shoot it from above to get another angle. You can shoot it from wherever you want. Just filling up your camera with lots of simple shots. So I'm going to pull the cloths out and support him every time I do it so he doesn't get that massive startle. in just because. Okay, so we've got all those out. Now I'm going to move him over onto his side. I'll quickly slip these pants off. Okay, so as I move him, I'm going to make sure that I keep the elbow close to the body. I don't want that coming out. And then just with my hand at the back of the hips, just a gentle roll. So you can see that bottom elbow is in really nice and close to his body. I'm going to use a nice cream cheesecloth. Don't want it to tickle him as I go over the top. So keeping my hands on him as I tuck it in. And bringing those feet in nice and close to his bottom. So you could position them with their head at this end of the bag towards the light, or you can do it at that end and just rotate your bag around to where the light falls across their face. So now that it's tucked in at the front there, I can give it a tuck at the back. And then I'm going to bring a couple of cloth nappies in underneath just to help hold those feet where they are. So we'll fix that up in a second. So his little hand here, I'm going to bring up to his face. The reason I have the elbow in line with the body is that it's great to be able to bring that hand up to the face. If the elbow is out in front, the hand is going to go back towards their ear. And then in the photo, when you're focusing on their face, you're going to have this big, piece of skin, arm, an object, a body object in front of the camera, which is going to be blurry. So it's going to be competing for the attention of the face. And the face is always where we want the viewer to focus on. So I'm just going to open up his little fingers here. I've got my finger inside the hand. He's having a stretch with that leg. And I'm just going to turn his nose, when he finishes wriggling, up towards the ceiling. Do you use a pacifier or anything like that? No, that's fine.
Take one.
I'm just keeping my hand on his and see if he stops squirming. Good boy. So this little hand here, he's got this hand here like this, and then this one's kind of in front of his chin. We want his fingers to come out and his thumb to go over the wrist so that his face is now clear and fully visible. So I'm just going to push that thumb through, slide it over the top of the wrist. And now he's holding onto his own arm, and as he wriggles, I'm not forcing it, but I'm just keeping my fingers on the back of his wrist. He's strong. That was not me. Oops. You're a boy. So I'm just lifting his head off the blanket. There we go. And now when he brings it down. Good boy. Oops. It's coming out, both. It's all good. He's happy now. Look. And I can't even hide it because it's like going everywhere. Let me see if I can hide it in a shot before we move him, because I don't think it's actually on him. I think it's like on the blanket. Okay, I'm gonna get him up off here. This is a dirty one. This is how I would do it in my studio if it got to the point where it was, you know, you needed to get them off the bag. Sometimes when they go to the bathroom, you can clean it up without having to move them. And other times, there's a lot there and it's quite hard to get it cleaned up. So I'm just trying to put something between him and the mess, and I don't want him to cry or startle, so I'm just going to hold those in my hand for a second and warm them up. Yeah, leave it there. I've kind of got it between him and the blanket. Oh, you're hungry now. I always tell my parents as well, you know, like at the beginning of the session, don't worry if they go to the bathroom. It's okay. It's normal. It's natural. Got some fluff on there. So I'm going to sit him up here on my lap and scratch your face. Just going to roll him towards me. There we go. Say hi, everybody. I think we got it all. But there was, yeah, you can see that there's quite a bit of a mess there. So I might give him back to his mum and we'll see if we can quickly get through these go-to poses. What a happy boy.
Thank you.
There you go.
Nice job.
Hang on 2 seconds, let me get cleaned up here. Come on, I might grab that grey blanket out. Yeah. Thank you. If you hold that side for me. She nice and sleepy? Sweet. Come and have a seat again.
Oh, yeah, that's cute.
Okay, so we'll go back to our side pose again. can you turn that heater up again for me, please? Thank you. And grab me the basket. Yeah, that one there. Great, thanks. Thank you so much. All right, so I've got a nice cheesecloth that's going to go well with this grey. I'm going to leave her nappy on because you won't see it anyway underneath the cheesecloth. I'll just make sure my hand is nice and warm. So letting her just relax into that pose. I'm going to bring this hand here. Before I go lowering her hand, she's got it kind of caught up in there. I don't want to lower her head onto that and make it uncomfortable. Oh, she's lovely and sleepy. Whoop. When you're positioning the hand there underneath the face, making sure that that thumb is through, so it's not tucked up, it means the hand will sit nice and flat. And linking the thumb there over the top of the wrist and positioning that hand up underneath the chin. There we go. Same thing, tucking the cheesecloth just under the front, bringing the little feet into the bum. And then giving the image a little bit of detail into the distance. I'm going to come underneath her head, but I'm going to slide my hand in first. Again, underneath here. So my hand is about there to lift her up to slide the cloth nappy into place. We want, when we're positioning them like this, we don't want to be sort of propping them and posing them so we're pushing their face away from the light. We want their face to go towards the light. And by giving them that lift at either end, it makes them look curly, not flat. So I'm going to shoot this one really quick. Tuck those feet in. Can I give you that? Thank you. So I'm not sure if you can see over there, but her fingers, where her hand is, she's just curled the tops of her fingers over. So we want to make those nice and flat. And if you had like a wriggly, squirmy baby, she's not, you would take your safe shot and then you'd come in and fix those fingers. And because we're running out a little bit of time here, I'm just making sure that we get it right for this shot. When you're putting detail into the background like that with a bit of a wrap or a texture or fabric, you don't want it to be a distraction behind their face. So I wasn't a big fan of how her little foot was crossed there, so I just want to make it look a bit flatter. And she's like, nope. Pushing fingers together. And I'm focusing on the eye that is closest to the bag. There we go. I'll bring my exposure up a little bit. So that's at a full stop overexposed because we're shooting on such a light subject, on such a light background. So she does have her nappy on here. Just looking for something we can cover it with. So I'm just going to bring the cloth nappy at the end out. Slide that down. If you had a thicker pair of pants, you could leave the nappy on, but because these are a little tiny pair, this won't take long. There's another little outfit my mum's made. I always find it easier to put the pants on when they're on their side. Okay. So I'm going to bring the cloth nappy from her little head out when we transition her over onto her tummy. I'm keeping my fingers on her elbows on both arms so she doesn't bring those out. Oh, thank you. And I'm just going to give that a little pull. I'm actually not going to tie it. I don't need to tie it. So we're going to transition her over onto her tummy, but you can see how I've got like a bit of a hill here. It'd be like trying to push something uphill. So I just want to try and flatten that down a little bit, and because it's a beanbag, obviously they just move. Rightio. So I'm not going to turn her legs first, but I just want to make sure that they're crossed over. So when I do turn her, they kind of fall into that position that I want them to be in. So that means that the back leg, the foot is going to come over this leg. So when I turn her and she tucks her legs up, they're going to naturally be in that, that crossed over thing. This little arm here at the bottom, this is the arm that I need to come back here. So it becomes a support arm. So at the moment she's like this. I'm going to bring this bottom arm back here like that, so she doesn't roll backwards. So we're going to keep this hand here underneath her face, or you can even bring it out onto the bag. Yeah, she's nice and relaxed, we can do that. And just have it out in front. And then with my fingers on this part of the arm underneath, I'm going to grab her shoulder blade with the other hand, and as I kind of roll her over, I'm going to push with my fingers that arm through to the other side. And there, her little arm at the back and elbow have come out. And she crossed her feet over herself the other way. There we go. So when I'm positioning their little bottoms and their shins and their legs, I like to put my fingers underneath the shin bones, cross the feet over, and then by supporting this part of the body, you can bring the bottom half around to meet that front half. So their elbow and their knee are meeting. And that's how you get that beautiful curly look. A little arm at the back there, just making sure it's nice and comfortable. So before I start to prop her up at the front, I'm going to pop a hat on, but I am going to give her just a little bit of support here at the back just to keep her feet in place. I'm not lifting her just yet though. It was all gathered up. Hang on. So I've got it in place. All I need to do is just with my fingers underneath this part of her head here, just take her head, like lift her head just slightly off the bag so that you can use your other finger to push down underneath to draw the other side of that hat down. So I'm not lifting her, I'm just taking the weight of her head off the blanket there to slide the top of the hat down, the tassel. And the hat doesn't have to look perfect at the back as long as it's sitting really nice around the front of her face. And then bringing the tassel, again just taking the weight of her head off her hand to bring that tassel through so it comes in underneath the chin. Now I'm not tying it too tight because we can tuck things in. I'm just going to give it a little bow at the top here. I'm tickling her. So now I'm just going to get her face right on her hand, tuck the tassel underneath her chin, making sure her cheek is not squished, or pulled back like that tight, because we want it to be a nice soft cheek on top of her hand. There we go. I'm just going to give her a quick lift at the front and we can take a photo. So I'm holding the blankets back here, taking the weight of her head off the blanket and raising. And starting to curl her into that pose. So she's not pushed up as high as what, the baby is, for example, on the course page. But she's still in a beautiful little pose on her belly with her feet tucked up and her hand, underneath her face. We could refine it a little bit more, but we are running out of time. There we go. So with this type of pose, I would shoot it from quite a few different angles and things like that.